So I'm going to show you how the interview for 2023, for those of you pivoting into tech, green energy, or up the ladder into leadership, how those interview questions are going to change significantly. So let's jump into it. I am Daniela. I am a leadership career coach and strategist. I help professionals rebrand themselves as they grow in their career, because if you've been doing something for 20, 25 years, it's time for you to pivot up the ladder into leadership, and you have to rebrand yourself for that. I also work very closely with executive teams on strategy for greener paths towards energy, business, or DEI initiatives. So anything sustaining ESG, sustainability, your market standing, how you impact your consumer, how the consumer sees you. I'm typically called in by green energy companies, oil and gas companies, and big tech companies as they enter into Texas or as they enter into new territory. I'm one of the first and only Black owned consulting firms here in the US. So, welcome. I'm excited to talk about this because this is a very important question. A lot of people have been telling me, like, oh, I prep for my interview. Well, you might want to change the way you prep for your interview, because what they are going to ask you, that's going to change a little bit from what we're used to seeing. So, let's jump right into it. Is it true that the interview questions are going to change? I think I kind of already told you the answer, but let's get a little bit deeper. Let's add color to this picture. Interview questions this 2023, you're going to see more consulting based questions. You're going to see more skill set questions. Hey, you said you've been exposed to organizational changes such as mergers. Can you tell us how you would approach this coming into our company? Oops, sorry, I shook the camera. So can you tell us how you would approach this coming into our company? So they're going to get a little bit closer to make your skill set solve a problem for us type of questions, and away from behavioral questions. Because if you are a leader and you are a branded leader and you know how you lead and you have a specific voice for that, we'll talk about that later. Those behavior questions kind of answer themselves when you position yourself as a problem solver. And so those are the kind of questions that you're going to feel a little bit thrown off by if you're not used to answering them. So ask yourself this. Do you feel nervous at the thought of the spotlight being on you? Because I don't know if you've ever been in a leadership interview, but it may be a panel where 2 or 3 people are interviewing you. You may get a lot of questions. The interview may go on for an hour. And so my question for you is, do you feel comfortable in the spotlight? Because you will be put into the spotlight when you're into these, trying to get into these roles. And I don't want that to scare you. I just want to raise your awareness so you can begin to gently position yourself and consider your skill set from a different perspective. So let's jump into how you can capitalize off of this. How well do you capture what you do for your organization and what you do? So please hear me. I'm not asking you to tell me about your background. I'm not asking you to recap the resume. If they called you, they already reviewed it. I'm asking you, how do you position yourself when you open to a recruiter? The recruiter is the gatekeeper. He or she determines if you go to the hiring manager. This recruiter is looking for you to align with the post. And it doesn't mean by saying, if you apply to risk director, say, oh, I do risk directing in my current organization. No, ma'am. You have to translate your skill set into what they're looking for. So understanding intimately their language. So if you get nervous at an interview, or you freeze up, or you have a lot of awkward pauses, it's probably because you're not comfortable boasting about yourself, or you really just don't know how to explain what you do. And let me say this, when you've been working, I know a young lady, she's been at Schlumberger for years. Okay, so it is very normal for you to feel like, I know what I do, I just don't know how to explain it, because you do so much and you wear so many hats, especially if you've been in an organization where you've outgrown your role. Okay, and so this can get a little bit tricky. You're not alone. So this is something you do need to face, though. What's the source of that? Because that is typically imposter syndrome. Another thing is, a game changer is when you learn your imposter syndrome type, because then that way you know how to redirect their energy from that, and how and what makes you nervous. If you get nervous and you ramble and you freeze up a lot in your interviews, are you uncomfortable with awkward pauses? I always like to tell people, pauses are opportunities for you to redirect and take control of the interview. Are you uncomfortable with boasting your skill set? These are things that tie into your imposter syndrome type. right? If you were raised in a household where you're not supposed to talk back to leadership, or you're not supposed to brag on yourself because that's too proud, then it feels a little bit icky for you to ask for more money, maybe, or brag or boast on your skill set. And so keep in mind, when I say boast, I don't mean to be arrogant or to brag about how much you've done for your organization. No, I'm saying when you contribute something to your organization, are you communicating this in your interview? Not what you do, not what you're responsible for, but what you've contributed. Those are two different things. Contributions and what you do. Hey, we hired you to do this, but here's what you've delivered on. Two different things. So that's what I want you to think about. Quick tips. Understand what your organization does. Believe it or not, people get into interviews and they can't really tell us, like, hey, you come from Schlumberger. Oh, what kind of company is that? Is that oil and gas? If you're trying to pivot into tech, that recruiter knows nothing about where you're coming from. So you need to be prepared to speak into that. Another thing I want you to do is, do you understand how projects and deliverables you own in your organization tie into the bigger picture? Okay, if you tell me you work in project controls, what does that mean? Okay, what kind of projects are you on? Capital project, modernization, concept? Like, what are you doing? Right? How does that affect the overall organization? Right? How does your deliverable impact the organization? What does your organization do? If you don't know how to answer those questions, you will struggle like hell in interviews. Okay? Face what feelings and thoughts come up before the interview, because that will make you nervous if you face it when you're in the interview. Again, if the thought of the spotlight being on you makes you nervous, the question is, it's imposter syndrome, of course. What about that spotlight being on you? Do you feel like you might look fake or like a fraud? And a lot of this goes back to, you know what you do, but you don't really know how to talk about it in a way that doesn't set you up for failure. And so just know you're not alone, and we're going to talk about how to fix that in a minute. And last but not least, join the workshops where I cover this. I have so many free workshops, and so I'd love for you to make sure you join my community by subscribing to my YouTube channel, because this is where I do like quick snippets, how to ask for more money, market breakdown reports, and things like that. Also, I want you to consider joining my Patreon, because I go into deep depth and detail. The reason why I said you need to know what your organization does is because when I go over this in Patreon, I'm giving you bites for your interview. You do need to be able to translate in a simple and quick way what kind of background you have as far as your organization. And then you also need to be able to relate it to the company that you are applying for, even if it is in a different industry. And so one of the workshops that I have coming up is going to run every weekend this month. And I'm only taking 30 people per weekend. It's called Imposter Influence, and it's basically set up to help you maneuver spitfire questions in an interview. I start off day one talking about imposter syndrome and your imposter type, where it's coming from, why those feelings come up. Because here's the thing, I can give you a great resume, I can tell you what to say in the interview, but if you can't sell it and you don't believe in yourself, or you don't really trust your own voice, it's going to show when you get in that interview and you're going to choke. So that's why this workshop means so much to me, because it goes deeper than interview, resume. It goes into, why do you struggle with that, and let's fix it and get to the root of it. I just want to say this. The reason why these workshops and my channel mean so much to me is because I feel like African Americans, Latinas, so many of us, even Asians, we get left out of these wealth conversations. And then when it's time for something to happen, we're like the last to scramble. So that's why I started the Patreon, to give you forecast reports and break it down in ways that you can digest it and understand and actually get use out of it. My workshops are to work with you more intense in a small group, so that you are prepared before you get in front of that recruiter, learning how to build your engagement and your network so you can advance up the ladder and open the door for new opportunities. Thanks so much for watching this. I hope you subscribe to the YouTube channel. All my social media is at Slaypedia, and God bless.